Welcome to part 3 of the French Revolution lecture that we're giving here in our world history class. We are going to pick up our story today with the Declaration of the Rights of Man. So as the revolution has begun, we've had our small victories, but for the most part, everything that the revolution is doing has not really actually made any changes yet. And we need to sort of clarify what's happening with this revolution, where it's going, what we want. And we're going to do that through the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. So let's dive in here and take a look at this. The previous events that we covered, the storming of the Bastille, as well as the Great Fear out in the countryside, is going to convince many members of the Second Estate, many of the nobility, will begin to join the National Assembly. As you recall, the National Assembly was formed by the Third Estate during the Estates General that was called by Louis in order to approve taxes on the nobility. Taking advantage of that opportunity, the Third Estate formed this National Assembly, and they see themselves as this new French government that is destined to make laws and benefit the people of France. Now that we've had some violence and now that we've had some victories, we're going to see the National Assembly become a little bit more bold. On August the 4th, 1789, the National Assembly voted to abolish the estates and all privileges of the First and Second Estates. This is a way to end the old regime, to end the feudalism in France by declaring that the estates and all privileges have been abolished. 22 days later, on August the 26th, 1789, the National Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. Now, these are monumental actions by this revolutionary government, but for the most part, it's just words on paper. It doesn't really have the power of law whatsoever because Louis is the law. Louis XVI is an absolute monarch, and Louis fails to recognize either. So we have a group of people who are attempting to change things, but Louis is not acknowledging any of these changes. And without Louis's support or power, nothing is really ever going to change. We see some drawings here of fall of the crowned brigands. This is the revolution toppling over those in power. You can see the Phrygian cap here of the revolutionary as they pull down this old regime over here, all those privileged estates. So we're not going to go through the entire Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, but we just want to summarize it here a little bit. The Declaration is going to declare that all French citizens are free and equal. So there is your abolition of the estates system. All French people are citizens and all free and equal. Throughout the document, there is no mention of the king whatsoever, which essentially is very important because it indicates that there is really no future for the king in the eyes of the leaders of the revolution, and that all power will lie within the hands of the French people. And again, this is declaring an end to Louis's absolute monarchy. And all sorts of wonderful reproductions of the declarations are made. There's usually lots of symbolism included in those. If you want to explore the full text, you can totally check it out online. The first statement after the little preamble, men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Social distinctions may be founded only upon the general good. I really like number 4, how it starts. Liberty consists in the freedom to do everything which injures no one else. Hence, the exercise of the natural rights of each man has no limits except those which assure to be other members of the society the enjoyment of the same rights. These limits can only be determined by law. And it goes on to talk about a lot of things that the revolutionary leaders want to bring to France. And again, it embodies all of the Enlightenment ideas that we've talked about in previous lectures and in previous lessons, not only on the American Revolution, but also the French Revolution. So there's lots of Enlightenment ideas throughout the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, just like there is in the Declaration of Independence. But our next big exciting event comes 2 years later. So things are... I'm sorry, not 2 years later, comes later on the same year. That's another thing that's coming up. The next big event is going to take place October 1789. So the revolution kicks off in 1789. That's the Bastille in July, and now we're on to October, a few months later. The Women's March to Versailles, really important event because it's going to change sort of the geography of the revolution. Rumors are spreading that King Louis XVI is hoarding bread out at his palace of Versailles, which, remember, is about 14 miles outside of the city of Paris. That is where the king resides. That's essentially where the government resides, not in Paris, but rather outside of Paris. So the king is physically removed from the people, physically removed from the problems of the revolution. He doesn't see any of the problems at Versailles because at Versailles everything is perfect and beautiful and wonderful and full of gardens and flowers and fountains and servants and everything you could possibly want, right? But the reality is Paris is really what France looks like, not Versailles. And people are, again, angry over the price of bread. The price of bread is going up again and again and again. We haven't yet to solve any of these problems. So despite the revolution, despite the changes that are happening, despite the Declaration of the Rights of the Man and the Citizen, we still have high prices of bread. So these women are going to go off and lead this march to Versailles, hence the title, The Women's March to Versailles. Women are down at the market. They're complaining about the price of bread. The rumor begins to spread that the king is hoarding bread out of the palace. So the march is like twofold, right? Let's go get the bread, but also let's go and demand that the king actually do what he's supposed to do, which is solve some of these problems and address us and acknowledge us and agree that things have to be changed. So this huge crowd marches out to Versailles. And as the women march, more and more people join, and more people join along the way until they get out to Versailles. And they demand that the king return to Paris to solve the problems, right? Do your job, be the king, come back to Paris, come back to where you're supposed to be, and to address these problems. Of course, Louis, being Louis, says, no, I will not be coming back to Paris with you. I will be staying here, and you should all go away. Not a good choice by Louis because they're ridiculously outnumbered. So the crowd bursts into the palace, chases the queen all the way into her bedchambers, rips apart her bed and mattresses and pillows, and it's all quite terrifying and scary. The crowd basically arrests the king and queen and the royal family. They slaughter the royal family's guards, put some heads on pikes, which, again, are a big theme of the revolution. Heads on sticks. And then they literally arrest the king, and they bring him back to Paris. They march him back with a huge parade, and they go down into the cellars of Versailles, and they grab all the wine and the flour and the bread, and they tear off the branches from the trees as a symbol of liberty and freedom, and they parade the king and queen and the royal family back to the palace of Versailles, basically as prisoners of the people. And they do this act of violence, and it's very significant. It's the people rising up and physically bringing the king back home, bringing the king back to where they want him to be, to use their power of numbers and to go out and physically force the king to address all of these problems. Here we've got our heads on spikes here. Love this one, really cool. Which would be, if you were the royal family, pretty terrifying. So with this now removal of Louis from his seat of power at Versailles and his return to Paris, things are going to move a little quicker now for the National Assembly. So again, we've got some victories, right? We've got the Bastille, we've got the removal of the king back to Paris for during the Women's March. So now the National Assembly is actually going to take some action to literally change this government. And they are going to transform the government into what is a constitutional monarchy. So the National Assembly, again, is the third estate. Now members of the first and second have joined. They're coming out of this Estates General, and they are now trying to rework and rewrite the French government. And we're going to do that by creating this new government under the leadership of the National Assembly, which will be a constitutional monarchy. And that's a government where the monarch's power is limited. So there is still a king. There now will be a representative body of the people that will be making laws, so like a Congress or a parliament, that the French people will be able to vote for representatives, and those representatives will make laws, and the king will have to share power with the people. Very much like England during the American Revolution, we talked about how England was a constitutional monarchy where the king and parliament had to share power. And it's specifically stated here that the law is above the king, that the king is no longer absolute, that the law is more important. So the National Assembly begins to take control and create this new government. Well, they're also going to go out and take control of the church. The leaders of the revolution were not big fans of the church. They saw the church as this oppressive, controlling group, and that we needed to take control of them to make sure that they don't abuse their power and not give us the things that we need. So the National Assembly is actually going to go and take control of the church in France, and this is going to have some major consequences later on down the road. But one of the reasons why they're taking control of the church, besides just the whole political thing, is that the church has lots of land. Remember, we talked about the church owning about 10% of the land in France, and that land is very valuable. So the revolutionary government is going to take that land and they're going to sell it off to help pay off France's debt. Well, because remember, we are still ridiculously in debt. The revolution has not gotten rid of the debt yet. They also determined that the priests will now be elected by the property owners in the area in which their church exists, and that priests will no longer be paid through the church, they will be paid by the states. They will basically become government employees. Now, this is obviously going to anger the church, but it actually also angers the peasants. So the peasants who have, for the most part, been behind this revolution so far, this is where the peasants are going to say no thank you, and they're going to drop out of the revolution. The peasants, for everything that they are and everything that they don't have, they actually did like the church. They did find comfort in the church, and they don't like the fact that the revolution is messing with their church, replacing their priests and pastors with government employees, essentially. So the peasants are going to break away from the revolution. This is going to come back into our story a little bit later on. So the revolution becomes more a revolution of the urban class, the bourgeoisie, the cities. No longer really about the peasants at all. Now we have our little bit of our time jump, right? So we're in 1789. Now we're going to jump up to 1791. Things have been kind of quiet for the most part. But now Louis is going to shake things up because for the last 2 years, he's watched his country begin to change. He's watched himself become basically captives of the French people. They're living in a pretty awesome castle, and they still have their servants and guards and all that stuff, but they're not really free to go anywhere. So for 2 years, they've been held in the Tuileries Palace in Paris. And Louis decides that, hey, it's time to go. I've watched my power been taken away, and now it's time to get out of here. So the plan is to escape to the Austrian Netherlands, who they've secretly been in contact with. And this is, remember, Austria is where his wife and Queen Marie Antoinette is from. So the plan is that they're going to escape to the nearby Austrian Netherlands, and then they'll be safe from the French people. And then Louis will raise an army from Austria. Austria will basically loan Louis their army, and they will go back and they will reclaim the throne and put Louis back on the throne and end this revolution once and for all, and take out this National Assembly and any other leaders of the revolution. So in June of 1791, Louis and the royal family flee from Paris. They dress up as commoners, and they escape in the night in a carriage with a couple of guards, also dressed like common people, and they take off for the border and try to get to the Austrian Netherlands, and they are caught in the city of Varennes. And Louis and the royal family are arrested and returned to Paris under guard, and it becomes a big thing, kind of similar to the Women's March. The people are going to march the king and the queen back to Paris as their captives. And this is not good. This is not good for Louis. This is not good for his family. They are going to become now really prisoners of the French people, who have just seen their king try to not only abandon them, but to come back with an army to destroy them. If you want to pause and read this quote here from a member of the National Assembly, this is pretty awesome. Definitely kind of summarizes the feelings of the French people against the king. Because they feel betrayed. He did betray them, and he can no longer be trusted, right? Like, we have kept you around, dude. You haven't been hurt. You've been kept nice in your palace, and you're still the head of the country, and you still have power and authority, but now we can't really let that happen anymore. You've conspired to bring war to your own people, and basically anybody that still supported the king pretty much takes away their support of him. How could you possibly... So Louis' attempted escape from Paris essentially seals his own fate. He's not going to die yet, but he is on the path to execution. And after this event, we are going to see France form a new government. So in September 1791, after the king's attempted flee, the government that is now the National Assembly will become the Legislative Assembly. So in 1791 of September, the National Assembly is going to write a brand new constitution, creating a brand new government in France. This one will be called the Legislative Assembly. Now, this is going to be a limited constitutional monarchy. So again, very important to point out, it is still a monarchy, but now we add that word limited in there. So now the king he's still the king, but he has no real power whatsoever. So think about England here in the modern day. Queen Elizabeth, now King George, King Charles, I'm still not used to that, is just really a figurehead. That's what the monarch has become. They're a figurehead. They don't have any real legal power at all. And that's what's going to happen to Louis. So on the good side, hey, he's still the king. Bad side for him, he doesn't have any power, but he's still the king. All power will now go to the French people in the form of their legislative assembly, where the people will elect representatives to come and create laws and to run the government and to do all of those things. So this is a huge shift, right? We still have a monarchy, but now we have a limited constitutional monarchy where the king has no powers whatsoever. But despite the changes, right, despite the new government, we still have the same problems. France is not getting any better despite the revolution. France is still in debt. There are still significant food shortages. Prices are still high. And the question is now, what do we do about it? And the government is going to begin to split over the answer to this question. Okay, so what do we do becomes the reason why the revolution begins to split into some different factions. And that's exactly what we are going to cover for the last part of this video. The Legislative Assembly is going to begin to split into three groups: the radicals, the moderates, and the conservatives. We're going to look at each three group individually and understand who they are and what they want. So let's start first with the radicals. The radicals are going to sit on the left-hand side of the Legislative Assembly, the building where they meet. These political terms are still used today. So they sit on the left and are considered left wing because they sit on the left wing of the building. These are the people that are the biggest supporters of the revolution. They are definitely anti-king. So they are, probably not okay with this limited constitutional monarchy. They want a pure republic. They want France to become a pure republic. They are definitely anti-king. So they want more and more and more and more changes for France. They want more revolution. They want more power to the people. They don't think that the revolution has done enough. And the most radical of those people are a group called the sans-culottes. And the sans-culottes is those without short pants. So if you were poor, you wore long pants, like the image up here. You can see this guy wearing long pants. You can also see them over here. He's got his nice red and white striped pants. Very colorful outfits. But these are the sans-culottes. These are those urban workers that we mentioned earlier in the previous lesson. These are the people who are desperate. They've been living in the city. Their life is pretty miserable. They're very violent. These are the people who stormed the Bastille. These are the people who stormed the Palace of Versailles. And they want to spread the revolution not only through France, but they also want to spread the revolution to other nations. So they not only believe that this is something that we have to do here in France, but we are going to take this revolution on the road, and we are going to overthrow all the kings and monarchs of Europe. So that's the sans-culottes. Those are the radicals. In the middle are the moderates. So they sit in the center of the building, and they are considered to be moderates. They definitely support the revolution, but they're kind of okay with where things are, right? We want some more changes, but we don't want too many more changes. Maybe some more revolution, but let's not go crazy. So they're definitely not like the radicals in that sense, right? More revolution is okay, but let's not go too far. So they are considered to be moderate. Some ideas that the radicals have are good, and some ideas that the other group, the conservatives, have are good too, but they're in the middle. So then let's go to the conservatives, who are sitting on the right in the right wing of the building. They're very content with where things are. Hey, It's a limited monarchy. We've taken away the king's power for the most part. We're cool with that. Like, we're not really interested in a republic. We like the king on the throne, and we're kind of good. No more changes. The revolution needs to be over. Things are better, right? Now, most of the people in this conservative wing are members of the bourgeoisie, that upper part of the Third Estate, wealthy people. Also, many conservatives were also former nobles who still have a lot of wealth, who still own a lot of land and still have property and things that they can lose, right? So they're not interested in things changing much more, because if things change much more, maybe they start to lose out. Okay, so they still have wealth. They don't have the privileges of the old estates, but they still have a lot of advantages over almost everybody else. So they are totally cool with the revolution ending right now and things kind of staying exactly where they are, because they will more than likely benefit the most. And then the most conservative of these people would be the émigrés, people who fled France during the revolution. These are like nobles in exile. They would love to see Louis return to the throne, and they would love to bring back the Third Estate. So that's a really small group of people, and there's really no chance of this ever happening. But they are worth mentioning because the radicals are going to see these people as a serious threat to the revolution, and they're going to be taken care of, if you will, a little bit later on. So that gets us through basically the next phase of this revolution. We have stripped the king of his power. We've created a new government, but now we're going to start to see that new government split into some different factions. And in our next lecture, we're going to see what happens next in this wonderful French Revolution.